Clara's day began like so many others, with a sigh. The familiar chime of her alarm clock marked the start of another grueling shift at the cafe. As she dressed in her neatly ironed but slightly faded uniform, her mind buzzed with the worries of overdue bills, the rising cost of groceries, and the relentless ache of fatigue that came from juggling multiple jobs. By the time she arrived at the cafe, the morning rush was already a blur of clinking cutlery, steaming cups of espresso, and the soft murmur of conversations between patrons. The cafe, though cozy, had seen better days. The tables were scratched from years of use, and the once bright wallpaper had dulled to a muted beige. Yet Clara found some comfort in the predictability of her routine. Her manager, a kind but harried man named Mark, offered her a small smile as she stepped behind the counter. "Hang in there, Clara," he said, sensing her weariness. Though his words were meant to reassure, they barely registered. Clara moved on autopilot, her hands instinctively preparing cappuccinos and placing croissants on plates. By mid-afternoon, the cafe grew quieter, the steady hum of activity slowing to a lull. Clara glanced at the clock on the wall, counting down the hours until her shift ended. Her shoulders sagged under the weight of her responsibilities, the familiar sense of hopelessness creeping in. It wasn't just the exhaustion of her job, it was the looming question of whether her hard work would ever be enough to catch up. Despite her inner turmoil, Clara maintained a polite smile for every customer. She had long since learned that kindness was a part of her job, even on the days when her heart felt heavy. The gentle ding of the doorbell startled Clara from her thoughts. She looked up from the counter just as three figures entered the cafe. The first man was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a crisp black suit that screamed security detail. He was followed by another equally imposing man, his sharp gaze sweeping the room with practiced precision. But it was the third figure who drew Clara's attention, a young man, striking in appearance, who seemed oddly out of place in the modest cafe. He was tall, with an effortless air of confidence. His tailored navy blazer and polished shoes spoke of wealth, but there was something unassuming in his demeanor. Clara's heart skipped a beat as recognition dawned. She had seen his face on the news before. He was Barron Trump, the youngest son of a former president. For a moment, Clara froze. Why would someone like him be here? The thought barely had time to form before Mark nudged her gently. "Table 5. He whispered, nodding toward the corner where Barron had settled himself. Clara gathered her composure, smoothing her apron as she approached his table. "Good afternoon," she said with practiced warmth. "What can I get for you today?" Barron glanced up from the menu, his expression polite but reserved. "A cappuccino and a croissant, please," he said in a voice that was calm and surprisingly soft. "Coming right up," Clara replied, her tone steady despite her nerves. As she prepared his order, Clara couldn't help but steal glances at him. He sat quietly, occasionally typing on his phone, while his security detail stationed themselves discreetly nearby. When she returned with his order, Barron offered a brief but genuine smile. "Thank you," he said, his tone sincere enough to catch her off guard. "You're welcome," Clara replied, her own smile faltering slightly under the weight of her curiosity. What was he doing here, in this unassuming cafe, far from the glittering world of privilege he seemed to belong to? Barron sipped his cappuccino and ate his croissant with a quiet grace that drew little attention. Clara returned to the counter, pretending to busy herself with other tasks, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something unusual was about to happen. Little did she know, this ordinary day was about to take a turn that would change her life forever. As the afternoon wore on, Barron finished his cappuccino and the last bite of his croissant. He lingered for a moment, staring at the empty cup as if lost in thought. Clara tried not to watch too closely, but her curiosity was impossible to suppress. After a moment, Barron reached for the receipt she had left on the table and pulled a pen from his pocket. She couldn't see what he was writing, but his pen moved with purpose, each stroke deliberate. When he finished, he folded the receipt carefully and placed it beneath the empty coffee cup. Rising from his seat, Barron adjusted his blazer, glanced briefly toward Clara with a polite nod, and headed for the door, his security detail close behind. Clara's eyes followed him until the doorbell chimed again, signaling his departure. For a moment, the cafe felt strangely still, as if the air had changed. With hesitant steps, she approached the table to clear it. Her fingers trembled slightly as she reached for the folded receipt under the cup. Unfolding it, her breath caught in her throat. The tip was generous, far beyond anything she had ever received. 4 digits stared back at her, an amount that nearly made her drop the paper. But what truly shook her wasn't the money, it was the handwritten note beneath it. Your kindness and hard work don't go unnoticed. My family has been where you are. Stay strong, brighter days are coming. Clara read the words over and over, her hands trembling as she held the note. It wasn't just a tip, it was a lifeline. The message felt deeply personal, as if Barron had seen through her polite smiles and glimpsed the struggles she carried beneath them. She sank into the chair he had just vacated, unable to hold back the tears that welled up in her eyes. For the first time in months, maybe years, she felt truly seen. The overwhelming kindness of a stranger, someone so far removed from her world, pierced through the armor of her exhaustion and despair. Clara? Are you okay? Her manager's voice broke through her thoughts. Mark stood a few feet away, concern etched across his face. Clara quickly wiped her tears, but it was no use. Her emotions had already spilled over. I'm fine, she managed to say, her voice shaky. She hesitated for a moment before handing him the receipt. Look at this. Mark took the paper, his brows furrowing as he read it. His eyes widened, and he let out a low whistle. Wow! Clara, this is incredible. It's not just the money, Clara said, her voice trembling. It's the note. It's like he knew exactly what I needed to hear. Mark nodded, handing the receipt back to her. People like that, kindness like that, it's rare. Hold on to it. Clara clutched the receipt like a treasure, her mind replaying the moment over and over. She thought of how effortlessly Barron had written the note, as though offering such profound empathy came naturally to him. As the cafe quieted again, she shared the story with a few coworkers. The reactions were a mix of awe and disbelief. Who even does something like that? One of them asked, shaking her head in amazement. For the rest of her shift, Clara kept the note folded carefully in her pocket, occasionally touching it as if to reassure herself it was real. She couldn't shake the warmth that Barron's words had left in her chest. When her shift finally ended, Clara walked home under the fading light of the evening, her steps a little lighter. She knew her problems weren't solved. The bills still loomed, and the challenges of her life hadn't disappeared. But for the first time in a long while, she felt hope, a small, flickering light in the darkness that gave her the strength to keep going. As she lay in bed that night, she unfolded the receipt one more time, tracing the words with her fingers. The message was simple, but its impact was profound. She whispered a quiet, "Thank you," into the night, feeling a glimmer of belief that maybe, just maybe, brighter days really were coming. The next morning, Clara's phone buzzed incessantly on the nightstand, pulling her from a restless sleep. Groggy and confused, she reached for it, her heart sinking slightly at the sight of dozens of unread notifications. Her first thought was worry. Had something happened? Unlocking her phone, Clara's eyes widened as she scrolled through her messages. Friends, coworkers, and even distant acquaintances had all sent her links, screenshots, and messages of disbelief. One text from her coworker Emily read, "Clara, you're famous!" Famous? Clara blinked in confusion before clicking on a link. It led to a viral social media post, a picture of the note Barron had written her, carefully laid out alongside the receipt with the generous tip. The caption read, "Kindness from an unexpected source. Barron Trump leaves heartfelt note and life-changing tip for struggling waitress." Her stomach dropped. Someone, probably one of her coworkers, must have shared the story online, and it had spread like wildfire. The post had already amassed thousands of likes, shares, and comments, with people across the nation weighing in. She opened another message, this one containing a news article. The headline screamed at her. "A simple note, a big impact. Barron Trump's gesture inspires millions." The article recounted her story, quoting the note verbatim. Clara's name was mentioned, and though the tone was overwhelmingly positive, the sudden attention felt overwhelming. Her hands shook as she scrolled through the comments. Some praised Barron for his generosity, while others expressed admiration for Clara's hard work and resilience. A few skeptics questioned the authenticity of the story, but the overall sentiment was warm and uplifting. Clara put her phone down, her heart racing. The note had been personal, a private moment of kindness that had meant so much to her. Now, it felt like the whole world was peering into her life. She wasn't sure how to feel. Gratitude, of course, but also anxiety. How would she handle this sudden spotlight? When Clara arrived at the cafe for her shift, she was met with an entirely different atmosphere. Her coworkers greeted her with wide smiles and curious glances, clearly eager to talk about the story. "Clara!" Emily called, rushing over to her. "Have you seen the news? People can't stop talking about what happened. You're trending everywhere." Clara nodded, feeling her cheeks flush. "Yeah, I saw." Before Emily could press further, Mark stepped in. "Let's try to keep things normal for Clara," he said gently, giving her a reassuring smile. "She's here to work, just like the rest of us." Grateful for his intervention, Clara got to work, but the day was far from ordinary. Regular patrons treated her differently, their usual small talk replaced with genuine admiration. "You're an inspiration," one customer said, handing her a generous tip. "I read the note," another added. "It's such a beautiful reminder of how kindness can make a difference." By lunchtime, Clara noticed an unusual commotion outside. Peering through the cafe window, she saw news crews gathering on the sidewalk, their cameras pointed toward the door. Her stomach twisted with nerves. "Looks like they're here for you," Mark said, appearing beside her. "Do you want to talk to them?" Clara shook her head vehemently. "No. I can't. I don't even know what to say." Mark nodded. "I'll handle it. You focus on your shift." As Mark stepped outside to address the reporters, Clara retreated to the back of the cafe, taking a moment to catch her breath. The weight of the public's curiosity was overwhelming. She hadn't asked for this attention, but now, it seemed inescapable. When her shift finally ended, Clara slipped out the back door, avoiding the cameras altogether. Walking home, she felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. The world had seen a moment of kindness that had changed her life, but now she needed time to process what it all meant for her future. The evening air was cool and comforting as Clara walked briskly through the streets, the weight of the day's events pressing down on her. The news coverage, the social media posts, and the constant messages from friends and strangers alike were all too much. It was as if the whole world was watching, and Clara was struggling to adjust to this new reality. She entered her small apartment, the familiar surroundings offering a sense of peace. The quiet hum of the refrigerator, the soft creak of the wooden floor beneath her feet, these were the things she needed to ground herself, to remind her that, despite the overwhelming attention, she was still just Clara, the waitress. Her mother, Elise, was sitting on the couch with a cup of tea in hand. Elise had been away on a business trip for the past few days, but she'd returned just in time to catch the news. As Clara walked into the living room, her mother looked up, offering her a warm, knowing smile. "I saw the story," Elise said softly, her voice full of love and understanding. "I'm proud of you, Clara. But I know this must feel like a lot all at once." Clara sat down beside her, taking a deep breath. She didn't know where to start. The words spilled out in a rush. "I didn't want this attention, Mom. It's overwhelming. Everyone keeps asking me how I feel, what it's like to be in the spotlight. I don't know what to say. All I wanted was to do my job, to get by." Elise placed a gentle hand on her daughter's arm. "Sweetheart, I understand. But sometimes, life has a way of showing us that the small moments, the ones we think no one notices, are the ones that touch people the most. Barron saw something in you, Clara. He saw your heart, your strength. That's why he reached out." Clara wiped her eyes, grateful for her mother's steady presence. "It's not just the money," she said, her voice breaking. "It's the note. He saw me. I feel like Like for the first time, someone really sees me, not just the waitress, not just the girl trying to survive. But me. Her mother's eyes softened. And that's what makes you special. You're more than your circumstances, Clara. And sometimes the universe sends us unexpected reminders that we matter. That kindness, even in the smallest form, can change someone's life. You've been given a gift, don't be afraid of it. Use it. Clara leaned against her mother, feeling the weight on her shoulders ease, if only for a moment. Elisa's words were the comfort she had needed, a reminder that, despite the chaos of her life, there was still goodness in the world. The night stretched on with soft conversation, and Clara slowly began to feel a sense of calm return. She had been seen, and now she needed to find a way to hold on to that light, no matter how bright or fleeting it might seem. The next day, the phone rang as Clara sat in the small kitchen, sipping her tea. It was a news producer from a national network. The voice on the other end was polite but insistent. "We'd love to have you come on for an interview, Clara. We think your story can inspire so many people, and we'd be honored to share it with our viewers." Clara froze. Her heart raced as the producer continued, outlining the details of the interview and the schedule. "It'll be a live segment," the voice explained. "We'll give you the chance to talk about the note, the impact it had on you, and how it's shaped your perspective on kindness." She listened to the details, her thoughts a whirl of confusion. She hadn't sought the spotlight. In fact, she had done everything she could to avoid it. But there it was, a chance to speak directly to the people who had embraced her story, to offer her own words about kindness, resilience, and hope. Clara thought of her mother's advice the night before. "Use it," she had said. Maybe this was her chance to turn the attention into something meaningful. Maybe she could show others what Barron had shown her, that kindness, no matter how small, could create ripples that changed lives. After a long pause, Clara took a deep breath. "Okay," she said, her voice steady. "I'll do the interview." The day of the interview, Clara arrived at the studio early, feeling the familiar knot of anxiety in her stomach. The set was polished and bright, the cameras and lights creating an overwhelming sense of exposure. But as the producer and host greeted her, their warmth and encouragement helped calm her nerves. The segment began, and Clara was introduced to the audience. She took a deep breath before speaking, her eyes on the host, but her heart racing as she tried to collect her thoughts. "I never expected any of this," Clara began, her voice trembling slightly. "I was just doing my job, trying to get by like so many others. When Barron left that note, I didn't think much of it. It was just a small act of kindness, something that made my day a little brighter." She paused, feeling the weight of the words. "But then I realized something. It wasn't just about the tip or the money. It was about being seen. About knowing that, even in my toughest times, there are people who care. And it reminded me that kindness, whether it's in big gestures or small moments, can make a difference. It can give hope to someone who feels invisible." The host nodded, clearly moved by her words. "Your story is a beautiful reminder of how important it is to recognize and appreciate each other, especially when times are tough." Clara smiled, feeling the nervousness slowly ebbing away. "Exactly. We don't always know what someone else is going through, but a simple act of kindness, whether it's a smile, a word, or even just listening, can make the world feel a little less heavy." The interview continued, and Clara shared her gratitude for Barron's gesture, emphasizing how it had inspired her to continue working hard and treating others with compassion. She spoke from the heart, and by the end of the segment, she felt a quiet sense of peace. As the cameras turned off, the host thanked her, and the studio crew clapped. Clara stood up, still processing the weight of what had just happened. She had shared her truth, and in doing so, she had given something back, not just to those who had followed her story, but to herself. Clara woke up the morning after the interview with a sense of quiet anticipation. The segment had aired the night before, and though she had expected the usual waves of messages and social media posts, what followed was something even more profound. Her phone had not stopped buzzing since she had left the studio the previous evening. At first, the messages were just from friends and coworkers, congratulating her for the interview and expressing how powerful her words had been. But as the hours passed, they began to take on a different tone. People she had never met were reaching out, sharing their own stories of struggle and hope. One message stood out among the rest. It read, "I'm a single mom working 2 jobs, just like you were. Your story made me cry. It gave me hope that things will get better. Thank you for sharing your heart." Clara's hands trembled as she read it, her eyes filling with tears. She hadn't realized that her story could touch so many lives, that a single moment of kindness, something as simple as a note from a stranger, could have such far-reaching consequences. At the cafe, things had shifted as well. The regulars, who had always been warm but distant, now approached Clara with more openness. Some left larger tips than usual, others took a moment to chat with her, telling her how much they admired her strength. Several had seen the interview and wanted to express their gratitude. Even the new customers who came in, drawn by the story in the media, were kind and respectful. It was as if the cafe had become a sanctuary, a place where kindness was the currency, and Clara was its embodiment. Soon, a quiet tradition began to emerge. Customers, inspired by Clara's story, began leaving their own notes of encouragement, some scribbled on napkins, others written on the back of receipts. They were simple words. "You matter. Stay strong. You've got this." And it wasn't just the people who had heard her story. Clara noticed that the small acts of kindness were spreading, like a chain reaction. The man who had waited for his coffee a few days ago now left an extra tip for the cashier. The barista behind the counter smiled more easily, offering free refills to the regulars who seemed to need a little lift. The cafe itself began to change. Word of mouth spread, and it became known as a place where kindness thrived. Patrons were drawn not just by the coffee, but by the warmth of the environment, the palpable sense of goodwill that seemed to hang in the air. Clara realized that Barron's act, as simple as it had seemed at the time, had sparked something larger than herself. It had ignited a chain of events that would ripple through her life, through the lives of those she encountered, and beyond. What had started as a moment of recognition and empathy had turned into an awakening that kindness could truly change the world, one small gesture at a time. As the weeks passed, Clara kept Barron's note with her, tucked safely in her wallet. It had become a constant companion, a reminder that no matter how difficult life might get, there was always the possibility for something better, something brighter. Her life hadn't become perfect. The bills still came, the challenges of daily life still loomed, but the note, and everything it represented, had changed her. Clara had learned to approach her work with a renewed sense of purpose. She greeted each customer, each coworker, with a little more warmth, a little more kindness. And in turn, she found herself receiving more of it in return. She had also started to give back. Inspired by the outpouring of support she had received, Clara began volunteering at local shelters on her days off. She helped those who were struggling, offering them not just food or supplies but compassion. She understood now, more than ever, the importance of small acts of kindness and how they could shift someone's entire perspective. And then one afternoon, as Clara was walking down the street after her shift, she passed a small, run-down bookstore she had never noticed before. The door creaked open, and inside, a handwritten sign caught her eye. "Pay what you can, take what you need." Clara smiled to herself, the words resonating deep within her. This was another ripple. Another act of kindness, unmeasured and unbound. The world, it seemed, was full of them, just waiting to be discovered. As she walked home, the note still safely nestled in her wallet, Clara realized that brighter days had indeed come. Not just for her, but for so many others, whose lives were touched by simple acts of compassion. She had become part of something larger than herself, a force of positivity that had changed her outlook and inspired countless others to do the same. And in that moment, Clara understood, the world was never as dark as it seemed when you chose to see the light. Months passed, and Clara's life continued to shift in ways she hadn't imagined. The cafe, once just a job, had transformed into a place where kindness was not only welcome but celebrated. Her relationship with her coworkers deepened, and her bond with the regular customers grew stronger. More and more people came to the cafe, not just for the food or coffee, but to experience the warmth that Clara had helped cultivate. It wasn't about fame or recognition anymore. It was about making the world a little better, one small gesture at a time. Barron's note, now slightly worn from being carried around, was still tucked safely in Clara's wallet, a silent companion that reminded her daily of the power of kindness. She had seen firsthand how one act of generosity could ignite a ripple effect, changing not only her own life but the lives of others. One evening, after a long shift, Clara found herself standing outside the cafe, watching the sun dip below the horizon. She thought about everything that had happened, the overwhelming attention, the kindness from strangers, the support from friends and family. But most of all, she thought about Barron. His simple, yet profound, gesture had been the spark that had set everything in motion. Clara wasn't the same person she had been before. She had learned that even in the darkest times, there was always a flicker of light, waiting to be discovered. And that light, no matter how small, had the power to change everything. As she locked up for the night and walked home under the starry sky, Clara realized that her journey wasn't about seeking recognition. It was about seeing people, really seeing them, acknowledging their struggles, their triumphs, and their worth. She was part of something much larger now, something beautiful and far-reaching, built on the belief that kindness could indeed change the world. And so, Clara carried on, quietly, humbly, but with a heart full of hope. Because in the end, the real legacy of kindness wasn't in the stories told about her, but in the lives touched along the way. The ripples of her story would continue, spreading far beyond what she could ever see, reminding others that even in the smallest moments, kindness had the power to light the way. Thank you so much for taking the time to follow Clara's story and experiencing all the emotions it brought. I hope this story has offered valuable lessons about kindness, perseverance, and how small acts can truly change lives. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest videos. Your support and encouragement mean the world to us and motivate us to bring more meaningful stories to you. Thank you again, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.